The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, appearing simultaneously on every screen across Earth. The Sentinel Federation had been watching humanity for centuries, and they were not impressed. Their ultimatum was simple: submit to their guidance or face extinction. They gave humanity 48 hours to decide. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the United Nations emergency session, her hand steady despite the weight of the moment. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent her career preparing for first contact. But not like this. Never like this. The Sentinels believe they understand us. She addressed the assembly, her voice clear and determined. Their message reveals their arrogance. They've watched us, yes, but they've failed to comprehend what makes humanity unique. The chamber buzzed with tension as military leaders and politicians debated their options. The Sentinel Federation's ships loomed in orbit, their technology centuries ahead of Earth's best defenses. By all conventional metrics, humanity stood no chance. But conventional thinking had never been humanity's strong suit. General Marcus Rodriguez, commander of Earth's unified defense forces, stepped forward. Dr. Chen is right. The Sentinels see our technology as primitive, our military capability as insignificant. But they've missed something crucial. Our greatest weapon isn't our technology. It's our adaptability. Across the globe, humanity began to mobilize in ways the Sentinels never expected. While the aliens anticipated either submission or a futile military response, humans demonstrated their true nature: innovative, unpredictable, and absolutely refusing to follow anyone's script but their own. In research facilities worldwide, scientists began analyzing the electromagnetic signatures of the Sentinel ships. In Silicon Valley, programmers worked on decoding the aliens' transmission protocols. In Mumbai, quantum computing experts explored vulnerabilities in the Sentinels' communication systems. The Sentinels watched, puzzled by humanity's scattered response. Their studies had shown humans to be hierarchical, typically centralizing power in times of crisis. Instead, they witnessed something else: a species that thrived in chaos, finding strength in diversity and independence. 24 hours into the deadline, Dr. Chen made a breakthrough. The Sentinels' technology, while advanced, relied on predictable patterns. Their ships maintained perfect formation. Their communications followed precise protocols. Their entire civilization built on order and control. They're not just methodical, she explained to the emergency council. They're rigid. They've advanced so far by following strict rules and patterns. They expect us to either fall in line or fight back in ways they can predict. We need to show them something they've never seen before. General Rodriguez grinned. Chaos. Controlled chaos. That's humanity's specialty. As the deadline approached, Earth appeared to be making preparations to surrender. The Sentinels detected mass movements of people, large energy signatures, and significant communication activity, all consistent with their predictions for a species accepting defeat. They were wrong. When the deadline hit, humanity didn't submit. They didn't launch a futile military strike either. Instead, they unleashed something the Sentinels had never encountered in all their centuries of conquest: pure, coordinated unpredictability. Thousands of small, seemingly civilian vessels launched simultaneously from points all across the globe. The Sentinel sensors categorized them as non-threats, their programming dismissing them as evacuation attempts. That was their first mistake. These vessels carried sophisticated electromagnetic pulse generators, designed to operate on frequencies the Sentinels had never thought to shield against. Why would they? No species they'd encountered had ever thought to use such primitive technology against their advanced shields. The human vessels followed no formation, their movements appearing random and chaotic. The Sentinels' tactical computers struggled to predict their trajectories, their logical algorithms failing to find patterns where humans had intentionally created discord. Dr. Chen watched from the UN Command Center as the first phase of humanity's response unfolded. The Sentinels believe they're superior because they've evolved beyond unpredictability, she said. They don't realize that embracing chaos is not a weakness. It's the source of our greatest strength. As the small vessels swarmed around the Sentinel ships, the aliens finally realized their mistake. They had spent centuries studying human technology, human military tactics, and human social structures. But they had failed to understand the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their ability to throw away the rulebook entirely when survival demanded it. The first EMP pulses hit the Sentinel ships, causing cascading failures in systems that had never been designed to handle such primitive yet effective attacks. The aliens had built their defenses assuming any threat would come from advanced technology. They never imagined they'd be vulnerable to what they considered obsolete. As their perfect formation began to break, the Sentinels faced a terrifying reality. They had gravely underestimated the species they'd come to subjugate. This wasn't just first contact gone wrong. This was the beginning of a conflict that would force them to question everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. The Sentinel Federation had never retreated from a first strike before. Their massive ships, now scattered in disarray, pulled back to regroup beyond lunar orbit. Within their command vessels, the alien leadership struggled to comprehend what had just happened. High Commander Vex Trull, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation, reviewed the battle data for the 7th time. "Impossible," he muttered, his thoughts broadcasting to the command council. Their tactics defy all strategic logic. There was no pattern, no discernible formation, no rules, completed Sub-Commander Rylith, her crystalline form dimmed with concern. "They turned our own assumptions against us." In the darkness of space, the Sentinel fleet attempted to reorganize, their ships automatically trying to resume their perfect geometric formations. But something had changed. For the first time in their centuries of expansion, doubt had crept into their unified consciousness. Back on Earth, humanity was far from celebrating their initial success. In the underground command center beneath Geneva, Dr. Sarah Chen worked tirelessly with her team, analyzing data from the first engagement. The Sentinels' retreat had bought them time, but she knew it wouldn't last long. "Look at this," she called to General Rodriguez, pointing to a holographic display of Sentinel ship movements. "Their ships are trying to reorganize into the same formation despite the damage they've taken. They're incapable of adapting their basic protocols." Rodriguez leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "They're slaves to their own perfection. But there's something else here." He gestured to a series of energy readings. "Their weapon systems are unchanged. They're not even attempting to modify their defenses against our EMPs." "Because they can't," came a new voice. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's leading expert in artificial evolution, stepped into the room. "I've been analyzing their response patterns. The Sentinels have evolved through perfect iteration, each advancement building precisely on what came before. They've never learned to make evolutionary leaps." This revelation sparked something in Dr. Chen's mind. They're like a computer program that can only optimize existing code, never write new functions. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but they can only advance in a straight line. Rodriguez finished. "While we stumble forward," Chen said, a smile forming. "We try things that shouldn't work. We break things and put them back together differently. We make illogical leaps that somehow land us ahead of where we started." Across the planet, humanity's chaotic innovation engine was already proving her point. In Bangalore, a team of programmers had discovered they could use modified music frequencies to disrupt Sentinel communications. In Lagos, engineers had found that simple reflective surfaces, arranged randomly, could confuse the aliens' targeting systems. In Santiago, they learned that old radio waves, when broadcast in deliberately erratic patterns, could scramble the Sentinel's short-range sensors. None of these solutions was elegant. None followed conventional military doctrine. All of them worked. The Sentinels watched in growing confusion as their long-range sensors detected these scattered, seemingly unrelated activities across Earth's surface. Their tactical computers attempted to find patterns, to predict humanity's next move, but the calculations always failed. High Commander Vextrol called an emergency session of the Federation Council. The massive communication chamber hummed with the collective consciousness of the Sentinel leadership, their crystalline forms glowing with shared concern. These humans, Vextrol began, they do not follow the path of progression. Their development is chaotic, their methods primitive yet effective. They are using technology centuries behind ours, but in ways we never conceived possible. Perhaps, suggested Council Elder Zinthura, we should reevaluate our assessment of their species. Their strength appears to lie not in their level of advancement, but in their ability to use any level of technology unpredictably. Back on Earth, Dr. Chen and her team had made another breakthrough. They discovered that the Sentinels' advanced AI systems, which controlled everything from their weapons to their life support, were vulnerable precisely because of their perfection. The AIs were so optimized for efficiency that they couldn't process deliberately inefficient or illogical actions. It's like trying to divide by zero, Dr. Tanaka explained to the Global Defense Council. Their systems are built on perfect logic. When we act in ways that defy that logic, we don't just surprise them, we crash them. General Rodriguez immediately grasped the implications, so we don't need to match their technology. We need to be so unpredictable that their perfect systems can't compute our actions. Around the world, humanity began preparing for the next phase of the conflict. They didn't try to copy the Sentinels' advanced technology. Instead, they embraced their own chaos. They combined technologies in ways that made no sense, created strategies that broke every rule of conventional warfare, and prepared to show the galaxy's most advanced civilization why evolution favored adaptability over perfection. As the Sentinel fleet regrouped, they remained unaware of a crucial truth. Their greatest advantage, their perfect, logical advancement, was about to become their greatest weakness against a species that had mastered the art of imperfection. The Sentinel fleet had finally regrouped, their ships once again arranged in perfect geometric patterns against the backdrop of space. But something had changed in their normally unified consciousness. For the first time in their history, the Sentinels were experiencing an unfamiliar sensation: uncertainty. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a wall of holographic displays in the Geneva Command Center, watching the Sentinel fleet's movements. Their formations were still mathematically perfect, but their responses to Earth's probe signals had become increasingly delayed. "They're hesitating," she observed, turning to General Rodriguez. "Every time we do something unexpected, their response time gets longer. They're processing more scenarios, trying to predict what we'll do next." "And that's exactly what we want," Rodriguez replied, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "The more they try to predict us, the more processing power they waste. They can't accept that we're genuinely unpredictable." Across Earth, humanity's chaotic defense strategy was evolving in ways that would have seemed insane just days ago. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal elders worked with quantum physicists to create electromagnetic patterns based on ancient songlines. In the Amazon, botanists had discovered that certain plant frequencies, when broadcast into space, created interference patterns that confused Sentinel sensors. But the most powerful weapon in humanity's arsenal wasn't technological, it was psychological. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had developed a theory that would change the course of the conflict. The Sentinels' greatest weakness, she explained to the Global Defense Council, isn't in their technology. It's in their perception of reality. They believe that progress can only occur in a linear, predictable fashion. We need to show them that their entire worldview is wrong. The plan that emerged was audacious. Instead of trying to defeat the Sentinels through force, humanity would make them question everything they thought they knew about civilization itself. They began broadcasting messages to the Sentinel fleet, not in any single format, but in hundreds of different ways simultaneously. Some were mathematical proofs that deliberately reached incorrect yet functional conclusions. Others were art pieces that violated every rule of symmetry yet achieved perfect balance. They sent music that combined discord and harmony in ways that shouldn't work but did. High Commander Vextrol's crystalline form flickered with distress as he processed these transmissions. "This makes no sense," he communicated to the Federation Council. "Their mathematical proofs violate fundamental laws, yet we cannot disprove their results. Their art patterns induce responses in our sensor arrays that should be impossible. They are not just defying our tactics, they are defying reality itself." The human transmissions continued, each more destabilizing than the last. They sent examples of their history, not sanitized or organized, but raw and chaotic. They showed how their greatest discoveries often came from mistakes, how their most significant advances emerged from seeming failures. In orbit, individual Sentinel ships began showing signs of system instability. Their perfect formations would occasionally slip, their responses becoming erratic. The more they tried to process and understand humanity's chaotic nature, the more their own ordered systems began to falter. Dr. Chen monitored these changes with growing excitement. "It's working," she told her team. "Their entire civilization is built on the idea that progress must be orderly and predictable. Every time we prove that chaos can be more effective than order, we're not just confusing them, we're threatening their fundamental understanding of existence." The effect on the Sentinel fleet was profound. Ships that had operated in perfect harmony for centuries began experiencing conflicts in their command protocols. The more they observed humanity's success through chaos, the more their own systems struggled to maintain their rigid order. Human hackers added to the confusion, sending programs that were deliberately imperfect, yet accomplished their goals more efficiently than the Sentinel's optimized systems. Engineers broadcast technical schematics for machines that violated the Sentinel's understanding of physics yet demonstrably worked. But perhaps most devastating was the evidence humanity provided of their own failed projects, experiments that went wrong, theories that proved incorrect, mistakes that led to unexpected breakthroughs. To the Sentinels, failure was an endpoint. To humans, it was often just the beginning of a new path forward. In the Geneva Command Center, General Rodriguez watched as another Sentinel formation broke apart, its ships struggling to maintain their perfect geometric patterns. "They're beginning to crack," he said. "Their entire society is based on the pursuit of perfection. We're showing them that imperfection might actually be superior." Dr. Tanaka nodded, her eyes fixed on the data streams flowing across her screens. "They're facing a paradox they can't resolve. Their logic tells them that their perfect order should be superior to our chaos. Reality is showing them the opposite. For a species that has never encountered an unsolvable problem, this is devastating." As the third day of the conflict drew to a close, humanity had yet to fire a single traditional weapon at the Sentinel fleet. They didn't need to. The very existence of their successful chaos was doing more damage to the aliens than any conventional attack could have achieved. In the depths of space, the Sentinel fleet's perfect formations continued to deteriorate. Their certainty, maintained over centuries of conquest, was crumbling in the face of humanity's greatest weapon. Their ability to thrive in, and even harness, the power of chaos itself. The Sentinel Federation's command structure had maintained perfect unity for over 10,000 years. Now, for the first time in their recorded history, discord spread through their collective consciousness like a virus. Their crystalline forms, usually pulsing in perfect harmony, now flickered with conflicting frequencies. High Commander Vextrol faced open challenge in the Federation Council chamber. Sub-Commander Rylith, her crystalline form blazing with unprecedented intensity, voiced what many had begun to think but feared to express. "We were wrong," she broadcasted to the assembled council. "Everything we believed about civilization, about progress, about superiority, the humans have proved it all wrong. Our perfect order is failing against their chaos. We must adapt." Adapt. Vextrol's form flared with anger. "You suggest we abandon 10,000 years of perfect progression. You have been contaminated by human irregularity." But the seeds of doubt had already taken root. Throughout the Sentinel fleet, ships began breaking formation without orders. Some commanders, influenced by humanity's demonstrations of chaotic efficiency, started experimenting with unpredictable tactical patterns and finding them more effective than their traditional formations. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen and her team watched the deterioration of the Sentinel fleet's unity with a mixture of hope and amazement. The massive holographic display in the Geneva Command Center showed Sentinel ships moving in increasingly erratic patterns. "They're not just breaking formation," Dr. Tanaka observed, her eyes wide with realization. "They're beginning to innovate individually. Some of them are actually learning from us." General Rodriguez leaned forward, studying the movements. "And that's tearing them apart. Their entire society is built on uniform progression. The moment some of them start embracing chaos, the others see it as corruption," Chen finished. "They're facing a civil war of ideology." The conflict within the Sentinel Federation escalated rapidly. Ships commanded by those who wished to learn from humanity began separating from the main fleet. Those who clung to the old ways of perfect order tried to force them back into formation, leading to the first internal conflicts in Sentinel history. In the Federation Council chamber, the division reached its breaking point. Elder Zinthora, one of the oldest members of the council, raised her voice above the chaos. "Look at what the humans have achieved. They advanced through trial and error, through imperfection and adaptation. Their chaotic progress has produced results we never imagined possible. We must." Her transmission was cut short as Vextral attempted to silence the dissent, but the damage was done. Across the Sentinel fleet, more commanders began questioning their fundamental beliefs about progress and civilization. Dr. Chen received a surprising transmission from a group of Sentinel ships that had completely broken away from the main fleet. Their message was simple but profound. "We wish to learn." The Human Response Team, led by Dr. Tanaka, crafted a reply that would have been incomprehensible to the Sentinels just days ago. They sent not a perfect, logical proposal, but a collection of human ideas, theories, and principles, each one demonstrating how chaos and order could work together, how imperfection could lead to greater advancement than the pursuit of perfection ever could. In orbit, the Sentinel fleet's disarray reached critical levels. Ships that had maintained perfect geometric spacing for centuries now moved in seemingly random patterns. Some embraced the new chaos, their systems actually performing better without the constraints of perfect order. Others, attempting to maintain their traditional formations, found their effectiveness dramatically reduced. High Commander Vextral made one final attempt to restore order. He transmitted a command sequence designed to force all Sentinel ships back into their standard formation. The response shocked even him. More than half the fleet simply ignored the command. "You don't understand," Sub-Commander Rylith transmitted to the increasingly isolated leader. "We've discovered something the humans knew all along. True advancement doesn't come from perfecting a single path. It comes from exploring countless paths, even the ones that seem wrong." In the Geneva Command Center, humanity watched as the mighty Sentinel Federation began to tear itself apart. Not through physical warfare, but through the much more powerful force of ideological revolution. "We never needed to defeat their technology," Dr. Chen said softly, watching the events unfold. "We just needed to show them a better way to exist." General Rodriguez nodded. "And in doing so, we've done something even more remarkable. We've given them the gift of chaos, the freedom to question, to fail, to adapt, and to grow in ways their perfect order never allowed." As the fourth day of the conflict drew to a close, the once unified Sentinel Federation had split into two distinct groups: those who clung desperately to their old ways of perfect order, and those who had begun to embrace the chaotic potential that humanity had shown them. The breaking point had been reached, but it wasn't the kind of break anyone had expected. In their attempt to subjugate humanity, the Sentinels had instead found themselves transformed by the very species they had considered primitive. The question now was not whether humanity would survive, but what the Sentinels would become as they grappled with their newfound understanding of progress and civilization. The fifth day dawned on a transformed solar system. The once perfect Sentinel fleet had split into two distinct groups. The traditionalists, led by the increasingly isolated High Commander Vextrol, and the evolutionists, who had embraced humanity's teachings about the power of adaptive chaos. In the Geneva Command Center, Dr. Sarah Chen studied the readings from both groups with intense interest. The evolutionist ships, though still incredibly advanced, had begun experimenting with randomized patterns and unpredictable tactics. Their efficiency ratings, remarkably, had increased by over 300%. "Look at this," she called to General Rodriguez, pointing to a particularly fascinating data stream. "The evolutionist ships aren't just copying our chaos, they're combining it with their existing technology in ways we never imagined possible." Dr. Tanaka rushed into the room, her tablet displaying new sensor data. "It's even more remarkable than that. The evolutionist sentinels have begun modifying their crystalline forms. They're introducing deliberate imperfections into their structures, creating what they call adaptive nodes." The implications were staggering. The sentinels, a species that had spent millennia pursuing perfect order, were now voluntarily embracing imperfection as a path to greater advancement. High Commander Vextrol watched in horror as more ships defected to the evolutionist faction. His remaining fleet, still arranged in mathematically perfect formations, had become a symbol of stagnation rather than superiority. "This ends now," he transmitted to his loyal followers. "We will purge this human corruption from our civilization. Prepare for attack formation." But the universe had one more lesson to teach the traditionalists about the power of adaptive chaos. As Vextrol's fleet moved to attack, they found themselves facing not just the evolutionist ships, but a completely new form of defense. Humanity had worked through the night with their new evolutionist allies, combining Earth's chaotic innovation with Sentinel technology. The result was something neither civilization could have created alone. Dr. Chen called it the entropy web, a network of small satellites that generated overlapping fields of controlled chaos. These fields didn't just disrupt the traditionalists' perfect formations, they actively rewarded adaptation and change. The more a ship tried to maintain rigid order, the more energy it lost. The more it adapted and evolved, the stronger it became. "It's beautiful," Sub-Commander Rylith transmitted as she watched the entropy web in action. "We spent millennia believing that progress meant moving in a straight line toward perfection. The humans showed us that true progress means being able to move in every direction at once." The traditionalist fleet's attack faltered as they encountered the entropy web. Their perfect formations, instead of providing strength, became a liability. Ships that couldn't adapt found their systems failing, while those that began to embrace change found themselves growing stronger. In the Federation Council chamber, now relocated to one of the evolutionist ships, Elder Zinthera addressed the remaining traditionalist leaders. "Look at what we've achieved in mere days by embracing change. Our rigid pursuit of perfection had become our prison. The humans have given us the key to true advancement, the freedom to evolve in any direction." High Commander Vextrol made one last attempt to rally his forces, but his own ship's systems had begun to fail within the entropy web. As he watched his perfect formations crumble, something unprecedented happened. His crystalline form began to change. The very technology he fought against had triggered an evolutionary response in his ancient species. The sentinel crystalline forms, static for thousands of years, began to develop new patterns, new capabilities, new ways of existing. Dr. Chen watched in amazement as the transformation spread through the entire Sentinel fleet. "They're not just changing their tactics," she observed. "They're physically evolving." All this time, their rigid pursuit of perfection was actually preventing their natural evolution. The conflict ended not with a battle, but with a metamorphosis. The traditionalist fleet, faced with undeniable evidence of evolution's power, surrendered not to force but to change itself. High Commander Vextrol, his own crystalline form now shimmering with new patterns, made the final transmission. "We have been wrong for 10,000 years. The humans have taught us that true perfection lies not in achieving a final, unchanging state, but in the eternal ability to adapt and grow. In the days that followed, humanity and the transformed Sentinel Federation began a new chapter. The Sentinels shared their advanced technology, while humans taught them the art of innovation through chaos. Together, they created something entirely new, a civilization that combined the best of both species' approaches to progress. Dr. Chen stood with Dr. Tanaka and General Rodriguez in the Geneva Command Center, watching as human and Sentinel ships worked together to dismantle the now unnecessary entropy web. We did more than save ourselves, Chen reflected. We showed an ancient, advanced civilization a completely new way to exist. And in doing so, we evolved too, Rodriguez finished. We proved that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our military might. It's our ability to show others that the path forward isn't always straight, that progress doesn't always mean perfection, and that sometimes the best way to advance is to embrace the chaos. As Earth's sun set on the final day of the conflict, it illuminated a solar system forever changed. The Sentinels had come to conquer and instead found enlightenment. Humanity had faced extinction and instead achieved evolution. Together, they had proved that the greatest victories don't come from domination, but from showing others a better way to grow.